All right, go ahead.
I'm David Dornan. I live in Helper, Utah. As I stand here, I'm in Helper, my favorite place. I got an undergraduate degree in painting and drawing from the University of Utah in 1976, and subsequently got my master's at Arizona State University in 1982. At that time, I was hired by the university to teach for 1 year. 17 years later, I decided I'm going to move full-time to Helper and see where my ceiling is. And so far, it's been a lot of fun and very exciting. Doing these shows with Ann Jesperson Fine Arts has been very interesting because there's a theme, and a lot of times artists think, well, should you paint for a theme? You get a lot of minds that are starting to think around the same way, and you can see what other people come up with, and I think that's important. It gets me out of my comfort zone in many ways. I know I can paint, but when something like something comes up like this show, which is called streaming, I scratched my head and said, I don't think I can come up with any streaming, because it seemed like a modern term, but also streaming is a quality that paint has. And so with this painting, I like to bring the viewers into my studio where the dirt and grime is, and the texture and the paint. You get to a show in a gallery, everything looks clean, and everybody thinks this is what the artist studio probably looks like, and mine does look like this. I have these types of containers around. My thinking is a little, in this painting, is a little bit thinking about Rube Goldberg behavior, where somebody invents something that does something way more than needs to be. I mean, you could simply drip paint. And I kind of mused about a colleague, Tony Smith, who said, came from lunch, he said, boy, I just read an article in Art Forum about Jackson Pollock's early drips versus Jackson Pollock's later drips. He said it was 4 pages long. And he said, for God's sake, they're just drips. And sometimes I think the art world can manufacture meaning in order to make something feel validated. For me, I like to think of this as some artist who lives somewhere and knows how to work machinery and things, and decides he's going to make a painting after having, visited maybe a lot of art galleries, no formal training, but I could make something like that, and starts to fiddle around. I don't want to document something that ever people say, oh, that, yeah, you see a painting of Mount Nebo or something like that. Oh yeah, that's the minute you recognize it, it affirms that it's done well and everything is great. It's got paint on Mount Nebo. But a lot of times people like to say, oh yeah, I have a painting of Mount Nebo. But if someone walks in who doesn't know about art, they could kind of scratch their head and say, what is this thing? So it doesn't necessarily confirm expectations of what a painting can or should be. It says that, heck, it could just be a lot of different things. The audience for the Eiffel Tower is big, and it's been on placemats and cereal boxes and whatever, and so many artists search for that. Well, I'm in search of the obscure, the object that's been overlooked, found in a dump. I like to, rather than, my paintings aren't about chrome and glass, they're more about residue and rust. And that's what interests me most is someone looking at one of my paintings and saying, oh yeah, my grandfather did this. And they start thinking, my paintings can somehow create a little dialogue for that person. Not a lot of people who buy my paintings will say something about that. I had a painting of a half jar of milk many years ago, and I was taking to a gallery, and I'm walking through the art department, and the executive secretary, Dolores Simons, said, "Oh, what is that?" I said, "Oh, it's one of my paintings." She looks at it and she says, "Wow, that's that milk bottle with the half full, half empty theme." And I got all these highfalutin ideas of what it means, I guess. And she said, "I remember when we used to have to put our milk bottles out with a sign that said I can't remember, measles or mumps or something like that, that these objects had to be quarantined." And so she was looking at that in a completely different way than I even expected anyone to look at. It's magical. There's a painting is going to touch someone somewhere, and I think the challenge for the artist is to get the paintings up in front of that traffic. During bad art, the period of bad art where everybody started painting, ceramicists started painting. Everybody could paint because the worse the art was, the more clunky it seemed, the better it was. And in Time magazine, I read an article that said the irritating Pepto-Bismol paint confronted by the yellowish urine-looking field makes a perfect pair. I think, okay, bad is good. I was always irritated, but when I saw bad painting, I realized some of these people were painting bad painting, and I'd look at it and go, how come I can see that, I could do that? And at some point I realized I needed some bad behavior in my painting, so I got out of this kind of coquettish, ooh, beautiful, Dave, you're a good painter. So all of a sudden I would just go, I hate this painting, boom, and then drips would happen. The drip thing came very interestingly in graduate school, and this is the source. I still have the painting. It's over at in my archives. I like the word archives. I have an archive in my archives. I was painting in graduate school at Arizona State, and I would go out and get various cans and jars and bottles, and I had them sitting up on a table. And then I had to paint this field. It was rather an aqua green field like this, and I painted it like that. And it's very hot, and I had liquid medium in it. And an artist from Germany who was teaching at Eberhard Eggers came in and said, "David, let's go for a sandwich and beer." So I said, "Okay, I get back to my studio, and that green paint had just gone dripped down through everything, over the cross of faces of things. And I kind of went, oh, man. So then I wiped it off of one thing. I thought, I like the way that drip goes behind. And pretty soon, I'm interacting with the drip. So the best thing that you can do when you have a painting that's just not doing anything for you is behave badly. I used to think, many years ago, I thought that if I painted too much, I'd run out of ideas. And it's exactly the opposite. The more you paint, the more things happen. It's a little bit like, I sometimes work with somewhere as I'm getting towards a show, I probably have 30 things started in various stages and racks and things, and I'll grab something and I'll develop one a little bit and another, and pretty soon I have about 20 of them that I'm trying to say, okay, these are gonna make okay, and then you mix up a color for a painting you like, and you get it up there and you put it, oh man, I have all this paint. And then I take that color and I find a painting I don't like and use it on that painting and attack it, and it's where two negatives make a positive. I've always thought that is fascinating, because all of a sudden something happens that jolts you out of your comfort zone, and the process of painting says, rescue me. And that's what's most interesting I tell artists that you won't be in painting for a lifetime if you're not interested in the process. If you're interested in the product, eventually the product will give you a comfortable living, but, and I've been there, you're on the treadmill and you're getting, wow, this is kind of cool. Somebody bought a painting for $500. And I'm like, yeah, well, I can do this for the rest of my life. And no, pretty soon it just gets more and more of a challenge to keep the process interesting. Something that says, get up off the couch and make a move. As with this particular painting, I found myself mixing up the paint, and I made a little V thing, a little thing. I put the paint in and I drip it down, and then I move it over, and my assistant CJ would squeeze the bottle while I'm holding the color. And I'm going, okay, I want it to drip right here. So what does that do? It comes down here and goes through a shadow, and then, so as I got nearer the end of the painting, I started adding what I think of as the key colors. I think that white went on very last. This blue was one of the very last things. That little spot of red made the painting for me. This is sort of like, yeah. As you know, it's all these paintings of the studio are kind of, the best I can define it is by a musician a crowd member yelled out, "All your songs sound the same." And the musician yelled from the stage, "It's all one song." And that's very true. If someone was to watch me paint, I'd say, "Hey, I don't do anything. I just go whoop, 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 whoop." And so people would say, "You don't really paint with brushes much, do you?" I said, about 10% of the time. My finger, rags, solvents. I use carburetor cleaner, which is basically a spray acetone. So if I want to soften an area of a painting, I'll spray it with carburetor cleaner early on, and so all the paints will kind of become gray. And so that area will go back and feel more like this is the fresh painting, and this is the history of all its forebearers, parts and pieces of, oh wow. And I think you go to, in Italy, you see a fountain and there's paint on it, or a building, the architect has paint on it. I've never been to Italy, but I've seen the pictures. But I've seen objects from that, and it's like the pentimento of it, the history of a surface is amazing. And for me, the history of surface happens all over Helper. And that's what I like about being here, is I know you can go up to the dump and wander around and find a broken piece of a China doll and bring it to the studio and have it sit around. Eventually that might find its way onto the floor of a painting somewhere. That's happened many, many times. And can I make it in Helper? Can anyone? I hope I can, but I know I'm as happy as I ever have been in my life. For the first time in my life, in 2 weeks, I'll be 69. And I kept thinking, I kept pushing that date for my I was an artist's early career. Well, 20 to 35, 40. Mid-career is 40 to 50 to 60. And then I kept pushing mid-career further. And now I've started my late career, and damn, I'm in my late career. Can I still do good paintings? And there's been artists who've done great paintings in their late career. There may be one just around the corner, and I'll have my prescription aesthetic glasses on when it happens, and it'll strike me.
Many of the works in streaming are still available. Please visit us in person or at www.ajfinearts.net.